that's slightly terrifying. Welcome to QI, where tonight we've gone all rock and roll. Please welcome on bass, it's Katy Brand. On drums, Eshaan Akbar. On guitar, it's Bill Bailey. And on lead vocals, Alan Davis. Wow. I'm so sorry, Bill. You are actually musical. That must have been painful.
It was,
yes.
yes.
I can only apologise.
That was an affront to my musical sensibilities.
Yes, I'm so sorry. So, to kick us off, what kind of music did they listen to in the Stone Age?
Oh.
Come on.
Rock. It was rock music.
It was rock music.
What?
Is correct.
Rock music like the Rolling Stones?
Yeah. It was going so well, and then you just opened the trap door like that. Yes, singing rocks used for music have been found all over the world. So if you go to Serengeti in Tanzania, there are stone gongs in Tanzania. There's one.
Stone gong?
Yeah, well, you can actually see the impression of where they've been struck. There are dolerite boulders, so an igneous rock with percussive marks in southern India. There's a cave in France, Fuamier. It's all over the world.
But how do they resonate?
Well, it depends on the rock and the type of rock.
Yeah.
It's called a lithophone. It's from the Greek lithos for rock.
Lithos,
yeah.
right.
So this is a Victorian group that you very pleasingly were called the Till Family Rock Band.
That
story.
sounds fun.
Isn't that fantastic?
It's the biggest
And those are all
xylophone I've
rocks
ever
that they've
seen.
laid out like a sort of glockenspiel.
Yes, exactly, darling. They're rocks from the Lake District. Indeed, the entire family is from the Lake District. The rocks are from Skiddaw. And it makes a most fantastic sound, and it is a huge pleasure to play. Have anybody here ever played a rock instrument of any kind?
I have played a rock, yes. Hit upon a stone that was designed to be struck, and it was extraordinary.
It makes a most beautiful noise.
Yeah.
So they have some in the British Museum. You're not really supposed to play them, but we have some security footage from the museum, which we're going to play you now.
It's kind of jazz rock.
I would say if I was reviewing that album, I would say, as expected, slightly disappointed.
Yes.
Wow. I thought it was very musical. I've got a 4-year-old cousin who can do the same kind of
There you go. See? Yeah. We're probably a similar height, actually. Yeah. Well, what was extraordinary was... I mean, I'm not musical in the slightest, but depending on where you hit it...
Didn't show.
Thank you, darling. I think Alan might win. Depending on where you hit it, it made a completely different sound.
Yeah.
Which you get stalagmites that have clearly been used as instruments, and they were struck 20,000 years ago. In fact, there is a new theory that Stonehenge may have been an ancient concert arena. So the inner circle of stones, they're called blue stones. They take on a sort of bluey tinge when they're broken or they're wet. And some of the blue stones have it's a microscopic structure in them, and it makes them sound like a metallic gong. They came from the Preseli Hills in West Wales, a place called Caermien, which means butter rock. And they've tested the rocks in the area, and a huge number of them sort of ring out when they are struck, and it may explain why they went to such an effort to take the rocks all that distance to Stonehenge, that in fact they were making music.
A butter rock would be a terrible instrument,
It would be a terrible instrument, yes. Now let's play butter. Yeah.
I'm guessing it wasn't a sort of touring operation.
No, I would imagine that the audience had to come to you.
Very much so, yes.
Yeah. Every time I see Stonehenge, I always think about Tess at the D'Urbervilles. There's a most wonderful line, and she's walking along, and it's dark, and it says, Tess suddenly felt a huge erection in her front. And it's Stonehenge. What do you think the term rock and roll originally referred to?
Some sort of body movement.
Yes, where?
In something that you're rolling, potentially.
Where might you have that kind of...
In a barrel. In a barrel. You put in a barrel and
put in a barrel.
a waterfall.
It's the movement of a ship.
In a boat, yeah.
Yeah, it's a 17th century phrase, rocking and rolling, to describe the movement of a ship on the ocean. And then in the early 20th century, you get it to be to do with dancing, to get spiritual fervour, and a euphemism for, you know.
What's that? What? It's a euphemism for...
Well, I was doing a hand euphemism there.
Oh, yes. The jellyfish claps around the bucket.
Yeah.
Two crabs colliding.
OK. Sex. Sex.
Oh.
I don't know why I was shy suddenly. I don't know what that's about. But the phrase, in terms of it being used for music, it was a Cleveland radio DJ known as Alan Freed, and he used rock and roll for the very first time in 1951 to describe what we now know as rock and roll music. Right, what are these people doing?
Moving a massive nipple tassel.
Yes. So what's this? Tippecanoe?
Tippecanoe procession. Does anybody know anything about Tippecanoe?
No.
This is to do with an American presidential election. So it's called a presidential campaign ball. So in 1840, William Henry Harrison ran for US president against the incumbent President Martin Van Buren, and his whole campaign centred around victory balls. So huge spheres. They were made of tin and of leather. They were more than 10 feet in diameter. And they had pro-Harrison and anti-Van Buren slogans written on them. And his supporters would go to a rally and then they would roll the ball all the way to the next town in order to gain attention. The word OK comes from this election. So Martin Van Buren came from Old Kinderhook, and OK comes from things will be as good as they were in Old Kinderhook, which is where he came from in New York. So this is the beginning of us using that expression, that things are OK. It's an extraordinary campaign because it spawned the phrase keep the ball rolling. That's where we get from. But Tippecanoe was Harrison's nickname. So he was the leader of the US forces in the Battle of Tippecanoe. And the campaign was a huge success. Harrison was elected president. First election in American history. There they are. In which a candidate won more than a million popular votes. Unfortunately, he died a month after becoming president.
Run over by a giant ball, I think.
And then the really weird thing, 1888, his grandson, Benjamin, was elected president with exactly the same strategy. So here is the actual ball, and you can see how big it was. It was steel-ribbed and canvas-covered, this one, and they rolled it around 5,000 miles from Maryland to Indiana.
By hand? Or
Yes,
did they
Dad.
have not even like a horse drawn
No,
thing?
supporters would roll the ball along.
God.
Wow.
No, it is astonishing. Yeah.
That's the bloke in charge of it, isn't he? He's not happy about it, is he? No.
Just found out the route.
You're going downhill for 1,000 miles.
Yes. I think it's the only grandfather-grandson duo in American politics, the two Harrisons. For a people who don't approve of royalty, isn't it extraordinary how many fathers and sons there have been?
They like a dynasty.
They do,
They like
don't
it.
There have been some truly terrible American presidential slogans. This is Ulysses S. Grant in 1872. Alfred M. Landon against Franklin Roosevelt in 1936. Nice. Yeah. Nice. Thomas Dewey versus Franklin Roosevelt, 1944.
That's pretty good, to be fair.
This is my favourite, Richard Nixon, 1972.
They didn't see that coming.
No. What would you have? What would anybody have if they were going to run for president?
Well, I mean, my surname Akbar means the greatest.
Oh, well, you're off and
Well,
running.
you're on the
So
way.
it'd probably be Allahu Akbar. No. Probably Eshaan is Akbar, so Eshaan is the greatest.
Yes, that's right. I think that's very strange. I think I'd just have I'd be best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the best slogan's the sort of thing you say to children when you need them to pay attention. So I think mine would be Katy Brand. Can everyone just calm down?
Yeah.
When I used to do fringe festivals in Canada, every year there was a comedy group, sketch group, and they called themselves Free Food and Beer, and that was their... that was their poster. Free food food and beer all over the town.
You just make some ludicrous promise that you can never, ever follow through, but...
Yeah.
Just
free anal sex with Alan.
Free...
Hang on. Play on the name.
Do you give it or receive or...?
It's up to you how you get it, but you won't be charged.
Right.
Just fluid.
I think that's going to be less successful than you imagine.
Also...
Are you saying that normally that is something you have to pay for?
Yeah.
My favourite British slogan, I think it was 2005, was the Conservatives' "Are you thinking what we're thinking?" Do you remember that one?
Oh, yes.
Every time I saw the poster, I thought, well, it's biscuits. I am thinking about biscuits. I don't know.
Well, I certainly hope not. Free anal with Alan. Maybe just inexpensive anal.
Yeah.
Tesco value, eh?
Yeah.
Every little helps.
I think you're going to get elected. I'm going to move on, everybody. In the 19th century, getting elected president took really big balls. I don't think that helped us. That didn't help us move on, really, did it? It wasn't really ideal.
Oh, that was good.
Thank you, darling. What's the problem with an ice runway?
Slip off.
What are you saying? It's too slippery.
Too
slippery. I was luring you in.
I think you said it there, Sandy. I think that klaxon was for you.
Yeah, but
the first time the host has ever got -10.
So the problem is not with taking off, it's not with landing. So what might the problem be?
Going sideways?
Is it just with existing, because it might just melt?
Yeah, parking, basically.
Oh, yeah.
You're absolutely right. So they are constructed in the Antarctic each year, so it services the US McMurdo Research Station, and it's made of sea ice, and they use it from July to early December. Apparently, when it's good and solid, it's a bit like landing on concrete, it's absolutely fine. But when the heavier planes come to a stop after landing, they start to sink into the ice because the braking heats up the tyres. And so what they actually have to do when the plane is sitting there, they have to train lasers and monitor the height of the tyres. And if it goes below 10 inches that the aircraft has moved down, they have to repark it because it just keeps on sinking.
I mean, that's quite a bold... I'm the first person who thought, let's land this hot plane on that ice.
Yes.
What were they drinking?
I know, it's fantastic, isn't it?
There's an airport I landed on in Svalbard that's on the permafrost. It was very bumpy, but the Norwegians they're very practical people, and the pilot said, yeah, there's a bit bumpy landing because the permafrost is melting because of the global warming. Anyway, have a nice time in Svalbard. What?
We had our honeymoon in the Arctic, and I was talking to one of the people that we met there, and I said, how bad is the weather? He said, well, last winter was very bad. The porch blew off my house.
Yeah.
I said, well, that's terrible. He said, no, it was winter. Who needs a porch in the winter?
That's right.
You can't really argue with that. You say, that's fair enough. Let's have another herring.
There's enough problems with just normal runways before you start ice. There was, in an old job, I had to work in Guernsey, and I don't know if you've ever travelled to Guernsey, but they have quite rickety, small planes.
Yes.
And as we were landing, it was clear that he was running out of runway, the pilot. Yeah. So I think what he decided was just to turn the plane off and let it drop. And when it dropped, he came over the town and went, whoopsie.
Once we were trying to land in a storm in Indonesia, and it didn't land, and then he came round again, and then he said, sorry, I bottled it.
The world's longest paved runway is twice the length of the shortest commercial flight. So the shortest commercial flight, I think we've mentioned it before, is Orkney. It's 2.7 kilometres, a little hop between Westray and Papua Westray Islands. But the runway at Chandobanda Airport in Tibet is 5.5 kilometres long. So here's the thing, the airport is nearly 4,500 metres above sea level, and the thinner air means that the aircraft needs to gain more speed in order to generate the lift required to take off. So that's an extraordinary thought, isn't it? That the longest runway is twice the shortest commercial flight. Right. Who's got the most rock and roll medical records?
Mick Jagger.
Why do you say Mick Jagger? Do you think
Because he's old?
No, it's not. No. It's not him. Any other thoughts?
So not someone like Lemmy from Motorhead.
Has he been under the doctor?
Well, years and years ago, my first job in TV was as a work experience runner here in this very building, and one of my jobs was to look after Lemmy. Not in that way. He was an absolute gentleman, lovely. As long as there were 5 bottles of Jack Daniels in his room, he was an absolute delight. He was actually very, very nice, but he did tell this story where he said that he had heard that people in the 60s were having full blood transfusions, people who had been addicted to drugs.
So that they no longer had drugs in their system?
Yes. And he had gone to his doctor and said, you know, I have been drinking and doing everything, you know, so I'd be interested in this too. And he said his doctor told him that if they were to do that to him, the shock to his organs of clean blood would kill him instantly. So it would be best to remain 90% Jack Daniels.
Topped up.
Yeah, just want to...
He lived to an ripe old age. So.
Yes.
That's why I've got a mug of JD right here.
So here's the thing. Western media, quite a wide range of it was banned in Russia during the 1950s and 60s. So there was a black market in bootleg gramophone records. Now, you had to fashion it out of some kind of readily available source of thin plastic. What might it be?
Condoms. No.
No, we are talking about X-ray sheets. And in fact, I have a record here.
Is that an actual one?
That is an actual one. So they were known, I'm going to try and say it in Russian, rok na kostyak, rock on bones, they were known as. They were also known as skelet moya babushki, a skeleton of my granny.
I see. So I can see now.
I've got this... I
can see the image of the bones.
Light box, and if I hold it
Look
up...
at that.
Like
That
that.
was amazing.
How amazing.
Then you can.
But does the record just sound like someone going?
This is a record by a Latvian-Russian singer called Konstantin Sokolsky, and we couldn't get permission to play it.
Oh, I'll do it.
No.
Yes.
But they pressed all sorts of music on these records. You could get Elvis, you could get the Beatles, you get the Beach Boys, the Rolling Stones, Ella Fitzgerald, all sorts of banned Russian artists. And they were very expensive because they only lasted for about 7 or 8 plays before the grooves completely degraded. But very popular for not only for their musical content, but their appearance.
So what is on this record, then, that he doesn't want playing?
A wonderful, sort of rather jolly, rollicking Russian song.
Have you heard it?
Yes, I have.
Can you recreate it to some extent?
Ha!
Right.
I thought I was in a pub in Glasgow for a minute.
Get me better with a couple of nipple tassels.
You can still buy them today. What I like is if they've got better-looking bones on them, they're more expensive. That's really good. On the subject of musical roles, I once had a pianola. Does anybody know what a pianola is?
It's a player piano.
Yeah,
isn't it?
player piano, yeah.
So it has a roll of sort of paper that you
We
attach
had one
to
when I
it.
was a kid. It was like a parchment with holes in.
Yeah.
And if you push the pedals quicker, it plays quicker.
Yeah, it's like a pneumatic air system, and it reads paper rolls of music. There are more advanced versions which exist called reproducing pianos, and it's not just the notes, but the volume and the tone, and you can effectively reproduce a live performance. So there are lots of famous composers, including Gershwin and Grieg and so on. They were recorded performing their own pieces. I mean, presumably now, darling, that must be possible with modern technology that
you could do if you wanted. Yes,
Just
I mean, there are
reproduce.
simpler ways.
Yeah.
Like, you know, laptop.
You're so boring.
I know. It's much more interesting to try and... Let's record it on some kitchen roll.
But the difference between that and a laptop is that, in a way, with this reproducing piano, you are still sort of watching the live performance.
That's right. Well, what the brilliant thing about this was that it would record the expression of the piano as well. So the player would put literally their very own imprint on the roll. So it wasn't just the notes, it was actually the expression and the way they played it.
So it's a bit like Grieg's ghost turns up to play for you.
Yes, it would be.
Oh,
it would be exactly like having Grieg in the room.
Yeah.
And we all know what that's like.
When I was a child, I learnt some Indian classical music, and we used something called a harmonium, which is a wind-based kind of piano. So you press it like this.
That's right. It's a beautiful thing, that, isn't it?
It's really, really beautiful.
But you're very musical anyway, aren't you, darling? You've been a choreographer in your...
I was a Bollywood dance choreographer, yeah.
How cool is that?
Oh, my goodness.
God, give us a couple of moves.
Yeah.
Go on.
Go on, I just want...
My husband is obsessed with Bollywood dancing. He loves it. But if you could teach me a couple of signature moves to teach him, he would be thrilled.
OK, I'll teach everyone then.
OK.
Something simple.
OK, now, the common misconception of kind of Asian or Indian dance moves with the light bulb and pat the dog.
I can do that.
Which you can, but that's also racist, so...
Right, I won't do that, then.
The dog. I won't do that,
Well,
then.
we'll
No.
teach you.
Do we have to get up?
No, no, no. You can do it sitting down. Because
OK.
the beauty of Bollywood is a lot of
Yes.
the dancing is in the face.
Ah, OK.
If any of you have ever looked for a remote under a sofa, have you ever had to do that?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so you kind of go like that.
Yeah.
And you don't find it,
Yeah?
and then do the other hand, and do it together.
Like it.
Oh.
And then middle finger to your thumb.
Kill the wasp, kill the wasp.
Kill the wasp, and then throw the wasp away.
Oh.
Kill the wasp, throw the wasp away. Right, so let's do it together.
OK, ready?
Okay.
Everybody
We've got a
together?
routine.
Ready? Everybody?
Right hand first.
OK.
In, can't find it. In, can't find it. Found a wasp, threw it. Found a wasp, threw it. There you go.
And you made a living doing that?
It seemed to work, yeah. It was 20 quid a job. You know, you did what you could when you were 16.
Fantastic. In Soviet Russia, music records cost an arm and a leg. Well, or at least a couple of ribs. While we're in Russia, how do you ignite a Russian rocket?
Buy her an expensive dinner.
A space rocket, you mean? A satellite launching...
You know, a proper Soyuz
Not
doodah.
they don't have the conventional rocket fuel type of...
Well, they do have rocket fuel, but you need to, you know, you need to ignite it. How are you going to do that?
2 sticks right next to it, and then...
Yeah.
You are so close. Really?
Lighter, get lighter. Does anyone have lighter?
OK, I have no lighter, but I have...
Matches.
Matches!
What?
It is
No way.
absolutely the answer. So the Americans, they're lit by the equivalent of a spark plug or the generation of heat through electricity or some kind of chemical reaction to create the heat. The Russian rockets are lit by enormous matchsticks.
I just have to say, the key thing here from a safety point of view is when you've lit it, if it doesn't go off into space,
Yeah.
Yes.
don't return
Don't
to
go
the
back
rocket.
to it.
Don't go back to the rocket.
No.
So, officially, these are called PZUs. It's the Russian abbreviation for pyrotechnic ignition device. They are birch sticks, and they stand upright inside the rocket. They poke into the engine nozzles. So if you look at these things on the right-hand side of the picture, each one has a pyro charge attached to the end of it, and they can be detonated simultaneously to light each individual engine, and we've made a model of what that would look like. So basically, it's a very, very large matchstick. It's a
Matchstick,
wooden
good Lord.
birch stick, and if you look into the picture of the engine nozzles, you can just see the end bit, that T-bar at the bottom of the thing. So they've been pushed up inside, and what happens is each has a pyro charge. You can see it on our model. They're attached to the end, which can be detonated at the same time to light each individual engine, and a signal is sent to mission control to say that we know it's all fired up, and when all of the charges signal, then they know it's good to open the fuel tanks and get going. They're amazing. They were developed initially in the 1950s for the R-7 intercontinental rocket. They're still used for the Soyuz launches.
Now?
Yeah, today, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Which up until 2020 was the only way you could get to the International Space Station.
I genuinely had an image of my head of like 100 Russians carrying this massive wooden stick running against the rough surface and watching it under the...
Yes.
But the fact that it's so simple has a tremendous advantage. So in 2016, there was a launch aborted because one of these PZUs failed to properly ignite. It's very simple. You can relaunch the next day. You just replace one matchstick rather than having to dig around and find out which bit it is that's not working.
Yes, there is a merit, isn't there, to simplicity in these things. You know, don't over-spec it. And the Russians are very good at that.
Yeah.
Oh, I was recently at the Tank Museum.
Obviously.
In Bovington.
Obviously.
Obviously. Well, I look about like a man that's been to a tank museum. No, it was very interesting because the Germans and the Americans had radio control between the tank driver and the gunner, but the Russians didn't have that. So what they did was the guy in the turret had to have really long legs, and he would poke the gunner with his foot. You know, signals. One bang on the shoulder, heart slightly right, 2 bangs...
Are you serious?
Yeah. And so...
You could tell a gunner by the bruises on his shoulders.
and it was much more reliable because the radio would sometimes fail. But the kicking on the shoulder
Works every time.
works every time.
But what if you dislocated his shoulder?
I like your concern for a gunner that you don't even know.
I look like a GP, so you've got to kind of keep up with the
Yes.
people.
The really bizarre thing about the Soviet rocket program, it was partly founded out of a desire to create a way of transporting the resurrected ancestors to other planets. I know, this is one of those things that you just think, that doesn't sound right, but it's absolutely true. So there was a Soviet rocket scientist, he's regarded as sort of one of the fathers of modern rocket science, called Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. There he is, sitting, thinking about rockets. And he was a student of a philosopher called Nikolai Fedorov. And Fedorov wrote this marvellous thing. He thought death should be abolished. He saw it as a kind of design flaw in human beings.
Fair enough.
And that we should resurrect all our ancestors. So he thought that if we travelled across the cosmos, we would be able to collect all the particles up that made up the dead and somehow, I don't know, squish them back together, create the original person. And once the entirety of humanity, past and present, was resurrected and immortal, then they would need homes and then we could colonise the whole galaxy. And it became known as Russian cosmism. And the scientist that we see here, Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, wanted to fulfil at least the very first step, and that was getting into space.
Wow.
The Russian way of lighting a rocket is hard to match.
Oh, you see? You see what you did there? Come on.
OK, how did hundreds of sheep, cows, horses, pigs and goats end up in the Houses of Parliament?
Well, general election.
Yeah.
Is it that the House of Commons is made up of the skins and hides of farm animals?
No, it's not in the seats. It's the... So what is the thing that they do? They pass... What do they pass?
Laws, legislation.
And these laws are kept in the parliamentary archives.
On vellum, is it?
On vellum, darling, exactly right. Well, until 2016, in fact. Parliamentary acts were still recorded on vellum and then rolled up. There are 60,000 of them. The longest is 1/4 of a mile long.
And that's what the Master of the Rolls is.
That is exactly right. He's the second law lord in the country. I mean, he's actually the president of the Civil Division of the Court of Appeals, but he is known as the Master of the Rolls because he used to be in charge of all of these documents.
And is vellum animal hide?
Yeah, so it's made from animal skin. So I think you've got some samples you can have a feel of. So the word, well, it's the same derivation as veal, actually. It's from the old French velen, meaning paper made from calf skin. So what you do is you... What you do is you treat the skin in a lime wash and you scrape off all the fat and the fur with a sort of curved bladed knife. It's called a scudder. And then it's washed and stretched even further. So this is the second stage that it gets to, and scraped then with a lunar knife, which is a knife with 2 handles and
Just go to Ryman's and get a pad.
I know. And then the final one, this is the actual vellum.
And does it last forever and ever? Is that the point?
It is phenomenally robust.
It feels very shiny, like you'd have to write on it with one of those permanent markers, which I'm assuming they didn't have 700
No, they
years
would have
ago.
used ink and
What did you have to
ink,
use?
but you would have had to wait for it to dry and.
The blood of the opposition leader.
Well, how much would you typically be able to harvest off of one sheep?
So just 3 or 4 pages. That's all, darling.
3 pages of sheep.
Imagine a sheep's pretty hacked off.
Is that all I am? A leaflet?
The University of York took a number of samples in 2014 and they found it was made of sheep and cows and horses and pigs and goats and so on. But there was a cost-cutting exercise in 2016 and it's now written on specially hard-wearing paper. In fact, there's only one company, the William Cowley parchment makers in the whole of the UK, who will still produce real vellum for you. It's waterproof, it doesn't degrade, it can be handled without gloves, it's extremely robust, just very resource-heavy. But the current Master of the Rolls, Sir Terence Atherton, he's also keeper of the Great Seal of the Realm.
Nice.
Don't you want it to be an animal?
I do.
Yeah.
Great big seal.
I know. There was one judge who held that title between 1614 and 1636, and he was called Sir Julius Caesar. Oh. I know. Isn't that pleasing?
Oh, look, he's done his beard and then he went out in the rain.
Oh, yeah.
And then he got angry playing badminton and punched the shuttlecock.
Yes, it does look like he's put his hand right through a shuttlecock. Now, roll up, we're going to have a game of Will It Roll? So, I have a game for all of you. So,
Thought we were going to, like the rocket thing, I was hoping we were going to have a
No, we're not going to set that off.
explosion.
Slightly frightened.
This is a game, and it's called Will It Roll, OK? It's rather straightforward. So, I have a cylinder here, And I'm going to place it here, and I want you to say whether you think it will roll down to the bottom of the slope.
Yeah.
Oh, will it roll?
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yes,
yes, yes, yes,
it will,
yes. OK, so that one does. Now, I have another cylinder here, and this has got very, very thick liquid in it. It's got honey, and we've put the balls in so that you can see what's going to happen. Do we think that this is going to roll down the slope?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, Eshaan, no. Why no, darling?
Because I think the liquid and the balls do something to stop it from rolling.
You see, once you open the...
When you're in the presence... When you're in the presence
Sir, I think I know
scientists.
that,
Say what you see.
Yeah. Bill.
yes, it will.
Yes,
It will?
roll. Surely
I think it will,
roll.
because
Let it roll.
Ooh.
Good, good.
So it will roll, but incredibly slowly, because what's happening is that the liquid is moving, and as it moves back into the jar, it's causing it to slow down. Although, can I just say that we had some cheaper honey, and it didn't work, and we had to go and get some from Waitrose. And then it worked. So the cheaper thing was not a good idea. Now, this one, I think, very slightly blows my mind. So what I want you to notice about this slope is that it starts down here in a sort of V shape, and I don't know if you can see, it widens out as the slope goes up. OK, so this is something called the double cone paradox, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it here. Does anybody want to suggest what is going to happen?
I'm going to suggest something
Yes.
that will blow my mind also, that it's going to roll uphill.
It's going to roll up. Anybody else?
Yeah, roll it up, back, up.
OK.
Wow.
Isn't that the weirdest thing? Now, I will try and explain it. So if you have to imagine, it's two cones put together, and so what's happening is, if you imagine that is an axle, we've got a straight line that you can see. If you watch just the ends, what it does, the axle is actually going down. It does your head in because it appears to be going up.
Is it an optical illusion, or is it...
No, it is actually moving, but what's happening is because it's widening out.
Oh, it's like one of those toys like you used to get with strings
Oh,
on a
yeah, with
piece
the
of
string,
wood
yeah.
that you could roll a sort of Diabolo thing up and down.
Yes, that's right. So the double cone paradox, it was very first published by a man called William Leybourne, and he published it in 1694. He wrote a book called Pleasure with Profit. He's actually a really interesting guy. He was a land and quantity surveyor. In fact, he's the person who surveyed much of London where a lot of it had been lost in the Great Fire, and he's the very first person to write an English book on astronomy. But I love, don't you think that's amazing, the double cone? I did not know about it, and it sort of takes you a while to get it into your head.
Yes, but is there some sort of cooking application? What's
Do you know what?
practical
We've been.
application
So
for it?
that was my first question. What is the practical application? And we can't find one. It's just curious.
Just curious. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it is quite interesting.
There's a hill in Essex, I think it's called Hunter's Hill or something, where I think there's a few places like this around the world where if you take your car and you'd expect it to roll down,
Yeah.
but it rolls upwards instead.
That's right. There's a few places like that.
there's a
There's
few
one in
places like
Scotland
that.
called the Electric Bray.
Do you have to have a cone-shaped car?
Yeah.
But those are optical illusions. It's not actually going uphill. Right, it's time for the round between a rock and a hard place, the roll of the dice that we call general ignorance. Fingers on buzzers, please. Where did the Pilgrim Fathers land when they got to America? Yes, Bill.
Plymouth.
Do you mean Plymouth Rock? Is that
Yes.
what you mean? Yeah,
Plymouth
no.
Rock.
Yeah, no.
Oh, you see? I was going for the Claxon.
No, they did not land at Plymouth Rock. It was further north.
Plymouth Rock Parkway.
Provincetown, which is about 24 miles away from Plymouth Rock. But they have this rock, this large rock where they go, this is where the Pilgrims landed. And it's completely impossible. Here is the rock. If they had landed alongside this rock, which at the time did not have that helpful date carved into it, it would have smashed the boat to pieces. Plymouth Rock is not even mentioned as significant until 1769, when there was an elderly man called Deacon Ephraim Spooner, and he suddenly remembered that when he was 6, another older man, a 95-year-old, had remembered his parents taking him to see this rock, and this was the very rock where the Pilgrims had landed, and that was 121 years after the boat had arrived.
This makes you think that most oral history is bollocks.
Yeah.
When they landed, was someone there playing a tune on it?
Yes.
That's why it's got a crack down the middle.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They didn't carve that date into it until 1880. And it wasn't actually named by the Pilgrims for the English port. It was already called Plymouth by John Smith. Do you remember John Smith from the Disney cartoon about Pocahontas?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Oh. He's one of my favourites.
When I was at school, this came out, and a lot of the boys in my class discussed quite crudely which of the Disney princesses that they would like to be with.
Pocahontas was number 1.
And I remember, like, one of the guys, like, Pocahontas is fit.
Fit.
Like,
Yeah. Pocahontas is fit.
Yeah.
It about her.
Yeah.
So you feel the same about John Smith?
No, I like him because he's such a rogue. So, in theory, she's said to have saved his life. That's probably unlikely to have happened. But he was a mercenary, and he fought the Turks in the Balkans. He was captured. He was put into slavery. He murdered his master. He stole a horse. He fled to Russia. And, in fact, he became so famous for all these things that had happened to him that the British thought, let's get him to set up an early American colony. Just thought, what a marvellous representative he'll be. He was arrested for mutiny on the boat over. He barely avoided being hung when he arrived. He met Pocahontas and then soon had to return to England. There was an accident when some gunpowder blew his genitals off. Yes, I know.
How do you blow your own...
How do you blow your genitals off and just sort of walk away? Like,
well, yeah, he
it's
did.
quite a controlled explosion, so...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how big it was.
What happened? I mean...
I don't have any more detail, but apparently...
What?
No, I'm so sorry that I didn't go into this more thoroughly.
Well, we all need to know if there is a sort of accident that can occur where your genitals can get blown off.
Get blown off.
But nothing else.
The closest is a testicular torsion.
I beg your pardon?
Which has happened to me.
What's that?
What is that?
It's where your testicle wraps around itself into a knot.
Oh, God.
What on earth were you doing?
Wait a second.
I was standing playing cricket.
Suddenly it went, woo!
It just, I think... Yeah.
Oh, my
I've
God.
never heard of testicles going into a spin.
It's spinning round like a sort of an Argentinian bolus, the thing that they catch cattle with.
And what happened next? Does someone have to just gently unspin it?
I was 12 years old, and the doctor said I had 90 minutes for it to unravel, otherwise they would have to amputate.
Oh, my...
And basically they said you can either amputate or you have to massage it out. God. I was 12 years old, I was massaging. I experienced for the first time an erection.
Oh.
And it was a big day.
Lucky you.
Best day ever.
All I'm sitting there thinking is, how do I get back to the Disney film? The elves have looked this up. So Smith was in a canoe with a pouch of gunpowder in his lap and it exploded, injuring him seriously, and he had to be taken to Britain for treatment. So there you are. Don't go in a canoe with a pouch of gunpowder.
So I'm assuming this incident isn't in the Disney film.
No, and the really weird thing about Pocahontas, do you know where she's buried?
Oh.
It's in Essex somewhere.
It's in Gravesend.
Is it?
She died in Gravesend, yes. She came to England. I think there was a sort of a thought that it would be good to bring over some Native Americans and they could meet the royal family and it would all be marvellous and everything. And she was on her way home and she became ill and the boat stopped in at Gravesend and that is, in fact, where she died and is buried. And there is a statue of Pocahontas in Gravesend. Now, what's more valuable, a precious stone or a semi-precious stone?
That's a trick
Oh.
question.
I'm just going to say precious stone just to get to get the ball rolling.
OK.
Yeah.
Do you want to go for semi-precious stone?
No.
No? You're going to say they're the same?
They're the same.
You're exactly right. The distinction between precious and semi-precious gems, it's no indication of their value whatsoever. So traditionally, there are only 4 gemstones that are considered precious. There's the emerald, the ruby, the sapphire and the diamond. But there are plenty of semi-precious stones which are more expensive. So it has really got pretty much nothing to do with price, and the industry doesn't use it anymore, those terms, because it confuses people. But it's still the case that engagement rings seem to be very popular in terms of being diamonds. That seems to still be a very big thing. Up until 1940, only 10% of engagement rings were set with diamonds, but De Beers, who own the monopoly on the diamond mines, marketed them so effectively that by 2000 it was 80%. Wow. And it was their slogan, "A diamond is forever," which just seemed to do the trick.
I've got a nice book called Elizabeth Taylor's Diamonds, which are just lovely pictures of all her jewellery, because she was obviously obsessed with diamonds particularly, and she used to make Richard Burton buy them with her money, and then present them to her as a gift, and she would pretend to be surprised.
Well, they're the ones, De Beers, who invented the concept of 1 month's salary being the appropriate amount to spend on an engagement ring. And
Oh, my girlfriend told me it was 2.
Well, once that caught on, they decided to make it 2.
Right.
Yeah. Not that you can blame the De Beers for these expensive engagement rings. I mean, since at least the Middle Ages, it was a way of getting collateral. So if your fiancé abandoned ship, then at least you had the ring.
Yeah.
Now, who had their ribs removed and why did they do it?
Well, there's the old sort of apocryphal thing, isn't there, that was going around my school when I was young, which was that Prince had his ribs... Yeah. So he could pleasure himself, yeah.
I think we like to call it...
I'm not doing this.
Autofellatio?
I want a car. What kind of car have you got? It's an autofellatio.
Autofellatio?
So no.
Right, OK, fair enough.
Not that.
No, not that. Any others?
Oh, well, for the tightening of a garment, was it? A corset or something?
Yeah, no, not that either. So, in fact, all of these are myths that we are debunking.
Oh.
Victorian women did not have ribs removed in order to gain an hourglass figure. No celebrity has ever had ribs that we are aware of removed in order to be slim.
Is it Adam?
I mean, that's supposedly what we're looking at here. Can I just say he's got the smallest penis in the... I mean, how...
That's perfectly normal size.
Oh, fine. So Cher is the one that's usually claimed to have had a rib removed. As far as we know, that's not true. And not true. Marilyn Manson is commonly thought also to have had...
Oh, that's a good look he's got there.
It's a bold look, I think. Yeah.
I went to see Marilyn Manson in Milton Keynes Bowl. So he did the thing he probably does in touring around America, where he goes, you know, come on, Delaware! And everyone goes, grr. And so nobody told him that Milton Keynes is probably not the greatest, coolest place. So he was shouting, Milton Keynes! Over and over. Honestly, it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
The only reason to remove a rib is, you know, for medical reasons, a bone graft, maybe to gain access to organs inside for surgery.
So you can survive having a rib removed, it's OK?
You can, yeah,
it's okay.
or remove cancerous cells, that kind of idea. But the idea that elite Victorian women did it in pursuit of a wasp waist is easily disproved because surgery wasn't too advanced. So women just wore progressively tighter corsets. They didn't have ribs removed.
They call them trainers, don't they? Waist trainers,
yeah.
where you train your waist with something else really savage so that you can wear nice corsets.
But it's still happening today, darling. The world's smallest waistline belongs to a woman who used the corseting technique. She's called Katy Young. She's 5'8". She has a waist that measures 21 inches, but in a corset it is
I bet if you put her on her side, she would roll uphill.
She narrows her waist down to 15 inches using corsets.
Really weird.
Yeah.
Pick her up with one hand.
Nobody that we know of has ever had their ribs removed for pleasure. All right, that's all for tonight. We've just time for one encore, and that's to read the scores. In last place tonight, having reached rock bottom with -33, it's Katy! In third place with -12 is Eshaan! In second place with -3, Bill! Our winner has been on a roll all night with a positive 3 points. It's Alan! All right, give it up for Eshaan, Bill, Katy and Alan. And I leave you with this from one of our greatest ever rockers, Lemmy from Motorhead. That was a great time, the summer of '71. I can't remember it, but I'll never forget it. Good night.